Good day, everyone. Today, we are very happy to have our successful applicant, Uni, to be here to share his successful experience with us about college application. Hi, Uni. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us and share your wonderful experience, which is very unique and special. And I remember that we actually talked about your thoughts about the college application actually before you even started a few years ago. So I believe you were in maybe ninth grade at that time.
hmm
Right.
Yeah.
So I think now, of course, you have finished your application and you have successfully entered into your ideal university. So maybe something has changed, some hasn't, and we would like to uh, listen to your good experience for all our audience, which including future applicants, the students, as well as their parents. So the first question is, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for inviting me over for this Q&A. So yes, my name is Uni. I'm a freshman at UMass Amherst, Massachusetts, and I'm a psychology major. Before that, I went to Cambridge Range and Latin for high school, a public high school in Cambridge. And before I went to high school, I was homeschooled for all my time up until I started Cambridge Ranger Latin.
Thank you very much. So if I could ask, as you feel comfortable, can you share your school list that you have applied for?
Yeah, so I wrote it down um, to remind myself. But so I applied to, I can just give a list, like read it out.
Yeah, sure, that's totally
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, so I applied to Harvard, Brown, Williams, Bates, Middlebury, Concordia in Montreal, McGill, also in Montreal, Brandeis, UMass Amherst, UMass Boston, Hampshire College, University of Vermont, and University College of Dublin. So those were 13 schools that I applied to. And the top four that I listed, so Harvard, Brown, Williams, and Bates, um, are the ones I did not get into, but everything else I did.
Right. So I would say congratulations because that's a lot of university that you have to say no to, I guess, which is a good dilemma at that time.
Mhm.
So I want to quickly ask about, so in terms of determining your school list, what would be your suggestion to people? Because I heard some applicants, they would say, oh, I need some uh, dream school, that's the term they use,
Yeah.
or like, I guess, ideal school, and also some safeties. So would you say that you need to have some kind of multiple tiers or maybe three tiers of university in on your application list when students are thinking about, okay, how many universities I should apply for, and how do I decide which university that I will be applying?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say most students applying to colleges do that like three-tier method of like reach school, so ones that are kind of you're not sure if you'll get in. Some target schools, which are colleges that are about around your level, and then some safety schools, which are some colleges that you can be pretty confident about getting in. Um, a lot of people think that the more colleges they apply to, the better. And in a way, it does give you more choices. But I would say that I would honestly say like now, although I did apply to 13 colleges, I would say now that I would recommend to just sort of focus in on um, just like a handful of colleges that you like in each sort of level, because I ended up doing about maybe three or four reach schools, maybe like three or four like target schools, and then maybe like five or six safety schools. So I just think that that was a bit too much and kind of unnecessary. Um, so I would say that the best way to do it is to sort of choose like, I don't know, two, three, maybe not two, three, maybe like around three colleges per level. Um, I mean, honestly, if you have like a dream school, like a, you know, like if someone really wants to go to Yale, for example, that can be their like one reach school, and that would be fine. So it really depends on the person and what they're looking
Right.
for. But for me personally, I definitely should have focused on looking for schools that I really liked and just sort of reduced. A lot of the times, I just sort of found a college and said, "Well, I might as well apply to it." Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
more chances of getting in, the more schools I apply to. But I do think now that it was sort of a bit of a waste of time and energy to just sort of apply to all these schools just to see. So I would say having like a couple schools per level is probably the best way.
Right. And I think it's very clear that knowing what you know now, that there may be some university that you really don't need to apply for, but you did it anyway for the
Mhm.
uncertainty at that time. Would you say if you do not apply for those schools, you would actually pay more attention to the schools that you are really interested in, and you would have done better, or no? It's just basically save you some time.
Yeah, I do think that when I was applying to colleges, I didn't um, take enough care to really look into them. A lot of the times, I would just sort of like, you know, look at their location, look at pictures of their campus, kind of maybe, you know, look at what majors or like what programs they have, and then I would just kind of think like, okay, looks good, like looks like a normal college. Let's give that a go. But I do think, I mean, everyone kind of does say, you know, like, you know, really look into the location, really look into like the lifestyle, like look into faculty resources, um, yeah, I mean, campus and things like that. So since a lot of the colleges I sort of chose under sort of a sort of a panic, um, because I originally applied to Harvard Early Action. So I applied early, but when you apply early, you're not allowed to apply to other colleges.
Mm.
So I applied there, and then I got deferred. So that meant that they were going to consider my application with the regular uh, timing applicants, and then eventually I did get rejected. But when I got deferred, I did panic a bit and decided to apply to a bunch of random colleges. Um, and I think that was pretty unnecessary. I didn't have to do all that, but I did. And yeah, at the end when I was sort of choosing between my last, I don't know, two, three colleges, everything did kind of come down to location, sort of what opportunities I would have in and after college. And of course, at some point, you start considering prices.
Right.
So those were all things that end up being the most important.
Right. So did you have a chance to like visiting different campuses or just doing some online research? I know pandemic
Yeah,
might play a role as well here.
yeah, that was definitely another thing. I didn't really get to do any college tours in around junior year, which is when most people try to do college tours. So I didn't go to any college tours, and most of the colleges I applied to, I did not visit. Um, I knew some people who already went to some of those colleges. So what I did do is that I would contact them and sort of say like, hey, can we hang out? Can you show me around your school? So I did sort of get an insider's tour, I guess, which is in a way better, because um, you know, you get the student's view. But I do think it was unfortunate that I didn't get to do like normal college tours just because I do think that that's really important. But at the same time, especially, you know, if for the pandemic or, you know, if you're an international applicant or,
Mm.
you know, if you don't like, you don't want to or you don't have the money to spend to travel and go look at a school, I do think that a good sort of, or something that a lot of students will do is that they'll apply to colleges with sort of minimum knowledge about it, or not minimum knowledge about it, but with minimum knowledge about the like campus and location, just sort of looking at pictures, looking at the location on the map, sort of like that. And then what a lot of people will do is to save time and money, um, only visit after they get accepted and if they really want to go.
Oh,
Um, so when I applied to all these colleges and I got into most of them, and then after that, I thought about what colleges I would really consider, and which ones were more of a real possibility. And so I only ended up visiting, I think, three. Yeah, I think I only ended up visiting three colleges, and they were sort of my last three choices. Um, so that definitely, I mean, it saved me a lot of time. But I would say that it is important to sort of see the campus and see how the students live day to day, because that is definitely that's going to be your life for 4 years.
right.
So definitely good to check. But it is also okay to do that after you do all your applications and get the results back. It's not going to be too late.
Yeah. So once you receive like all the results and
Mhm.
you pretty much sure like so you narrow it down to final three, right? So you are going to one of those threes pretty much for sure. That's why you don't necessarily need to visit five, six, or nine
Mhm.
of them, right? Okay, very good. So are there any particular factors that you believe to help you to get into those university? Because 9 out of 13 is I want to say it's quite achievement. So do you believe there's some particular factors that help you to get such a good result?
Mhm. Um, well, I do think that I had a pretty good application on paper. Um, I had I had good grades. I had straight A's in high school, and I didn't. I did. I mean, I had some extracurricular activities, and I wrote my application essay on sort of the experience of being homeschooled and going to high school, and how that's helped develop my learning. So I think that might have. I think some school might have liked that. Um, I didn't have that many, or I didn't have any like volunteer or like work experience all that much. I mentioned some things that I did on the side, sort of maybe seasonally, but I would say a lot of these um, like really prestigious like Ivy schools, they really like seeing students that are kind of doing a lot of things for their community, because
Mm,
they value like future leaders and people who really take action in their lives. So I do think that um, I mean, students don't have to do, everything that their school offers in order to get into a good college. And it's definitely better to not, you don't have to do things you don't want to just because it looks good, that just because it would
sure.
look good on your college application. But definitely like um, community activities, volunteering, um, even like working on a personal project. All those things can be really beneficial. I didn't do any of those, but I do know that that's definitely a good thing to do if that's something you're into. Um, but you can also definitely get into plenty of good colleges with sort of, sort of standard, like good grades, interesting essay, sort of hobbies, extracurriculars. Um, yeah, I'd say good grades definitely help.
Right. So would you
um,
say, for example, for the top tier school, you need to have certain GPA or higher and things
well,
like that, like for example, 3.8 above or 3.7 above, things like that?
well, not really.
Mm,
I mean, just as like a general sense, of course, like good grades, like for example, like A's, a B, things like that. Like those, general good grades will always be beneficial, but most colleges do not have a GPA cutoff, or, I mean, they'll have an average of people who were
right.
accepted, but ultimately, I mean, every college says this, and it's always kind of like, yeah, okay, sure. But they always say they're looking for like well-rounded applicants. They're looking at like, you know, your application holistically, trying to find students that would work well with their student body and their campuses. Um, so I would say never avoid applying to a college just because you don't think you have the right grades or because you don't think you'll get in. Just because you never really know, and if you don't, you'll always wonder if you like what would happen if you had applied. Um, but also, for example, with really, really competitive schools like Harvard, Brown, whatever Ivies, um, all pretty much all applicants are already going to be really strong students, and so you also have to not be too discouraged even if you don't get in, because that doesn't mean that you're not um, like a valuable student or a good student or whatever. Um, it's just truly there are so many applicants, and all of them are going to be really, really competitive and high level. So at some point, they just have to make choices, and um, college is a lot about sort of their business, and so an applicant could be accepted one year and not accepted another year, for
Mm,
example, with the same profile, because they might be looking for something different. They might want different kind of students, things like that. So it kind of really is unpredictable in a way. So it's better to not really think about it too hard, honestly. Um, but yeah, so I would say no real like GPA cutoff. A lot of colleges will sort of say, I mean, we mostly accept students with like, a three or a 3.0 GPA or above, or a 3.5 GPA or above, or um, most Ivies have students with like majority 4.0s, things like that. But you, I don't think I saw a single college that said we do not accept students under this level. So always give it a go.
right, thank you. So you mentioned already about that some improvement or at least things that you should they are important, like such as community services, volunteer work,
Mhm.
things like that. You think would play a role, especially for top tier school. Uh, but you don't have those a lot in your resume. So is there any other factor that you believe that if you do it again, you would want to add them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely have a lot of mistakes I think I made during my college application process. Um, I definitely should have researched the schools. I mean, I did
Mm,
mention this before, but
yes, yes.
I really should have researched the schools more in depth in
Mm,
terms of like location, like daily lifestyle, like sort of like, um, well, I guess location and lifestyle are kind of connected, but
right.
sort of like what's around the school, like what do people do in their free time, dorms, food, like yeah, like living situations, things like that. Um, and also, I really should have looked into more of like the technical aspect, like what kind of research opportunities or job opportunities,
Mm,
internships, study abroad, things like that. Definitely get to sort of check before you go, or even before you apply. Because I did end up I applied to a lot of these small liberal arts colleges in New
mm,
England because I sort of like that idea of going to this, cozy college in a nice rural area. But then after I applied, I thought about it for a bit, and I thought, I'm not, I don't, I'm not like a rural, like cozy, small college sort of guy. Like I really need something more active. And so then I thought, it was kind of silly for me to just sort of create this image in my head and say, oh, I think I want to do something like that, and then just apply to a bunch of these like small colleges in New England. I really should have thought about it more and applied to more city schools so that I would actually consider them in my final list. Because all those like small liberal arts colleges, I didn't even really think like consider them at the end, even though a lot of them were really good schools. It just wasn't a lifestyle that I wanted.
mm,
Um, and I mean, people do emphasize location and how important it is, but I guess I didn't really get that until much later. So I'm sure people, everyone has already said this before, but definitely think about location and sort of what kind of students you'll find there. Like, are there a lot of international students? Are there a lot of American students? A lot of like in-state students? Is there a lot of like racial left or like national diversity, or is it kind of homogenous, things like that. I didn't really consider that until the very end, because I grew up I would say I grew up in a pretty diverse location, like, near the city in Boston. And then I realized, so I kind of took that for granted. And then later on, I realized that a lot of these colleges are pretty like homogenous, just sort of maybe some of them don't have a lot of diversity, some do. So I only started thinking about that like at the end. So I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say definitely you want to really know your school. You want to know your schools really well. And I know that I didn't do that, but
Yeah. Thank you so
it's
much. Like it's so interesting. I think location, location, location. What it really means is basically, I guess, the cultural dynamic, like diversity,
mhm.
atmosphere, that in that lifestyle, in that campus and around it. So that most people probably wouldn't really consider that until very end. So,
Yeah, and oh yeah, sorry. And then yeah, I was just gonna say, and then in the end, that's where you're gonna be living for this
four
large
years.
part of a large part of your life. Yeah, so it's definitely important to consider.
Right. And talking about culture and diversity, I know that you have dual cultural exposure when you grow up. So
Hmm.
how important that is, you think, that in terms of application, did you include any of your, I guess, multicultural experiences in your application?
Hmm. Um, I'm trying to remember. I don't think I really wrote too much, just because the only way you can really express that sort of experience would be through your writing,
Mm,
in your essay or something like that. So I don't think I really wrote too much about sort of my multicultural upbringing, but I do think I mentioned it because that was sort of an important part of my homeschooling experience.
mm,
I think that being homeschooled made it easier for me to be bilingual because I grew up with my mom speaking Japanese at home, and I know that if I were going to school, like if I was going to school in America, I know that I would have been speaking Japanese much less. Um, so I think I briefly mentioned that in my essay. And then when applying to colleges on the Common App, at least, they do ask you your nationality if you have dual citizenship, and they do ask you your ethnicity. And so you can list it there. I mean, you can't really elaborate on it, but they can see that. And then they will also ask you about languages that you speak. So
mm,
all of that probably did sort of finish my like identity profile. Um, I think with a couple colleges they had supplemental essays, so like additional essays for that or questions that specific colleges are asking you to write about. And I think for some of those, I did write about sort of learning experiences from maybe like experiences I've had in Japan or growing up here. Um, so sometimes I would integrate it in, but I wouldn't say that it was sort of like a make or break
mm.
factor for me. Um, but in terms of choosing colleges and going to colleges, I mean, I would say that um, my upbringing or sort of my background is one of the things that made me realize that, oh, I do actually want like a diverse, like busy college and not something that's very small. Um, yeah.
And when would you consider a good time for future applicants to start to prepare for their applications?
Mhm. I would say mentally, you can start preparing whenever you want or as soon as possible. I mean, of course, you don't have to be stressing about like what exact colleges you'll be going to, as a freshman in high school. But I would say that honestly, I mean, I kind of think that everyone who is in school, whether that's, I mean, even starting from middle school, people kind of start thinking about how college is their sort of, um, I would say during like the middle to high school years, the end goal is getting into college. Once you're in college, then it gets a little more complicated. But I would say from around like middle school and throughout high school, people start asking about college. People start asking about what you want to do. You kind of have to start thinking about that. So I would say most people have already started mentally preparing. Um, in terms of like actual like preparatory materials, I would say most people start the college application process in junior year, as in people sort of start working on their personal statement essays and sort of start narrowing down their college application list. A lot of people start doing tours in junior year. I remember I wrote my first draft for my college application essay in my junior year English class because that was an assignment that we had to keep us on track. And I think yeah, junior year was when I started sort of narrowing down my college list. Just because if you do it too, if if you write your personal statement in freshman year and you have all the colleges you want to go to,
Mm,
by the time you're a senior, a lot of that's going to change.
right.
So I would say that it's unnecessary and maybe even a waste of time to do it too early because even if you think you're not going to, you're going to change a lot in high school. So it's definitely not necessary to start as a freshman or even a sophomore, really. But definitely good to sort of be thinking about it, thinking about, what things really, fascinate you in school, like what classes do you really enjoy, that kind of thing, like figuring out what you want to do for school. I would say starts early. Um, and yeah, thinking about or sort of making a college list early on is also probably good. That gives you enough time to sort of research and like look into them. I think that was maybe one of my mistakes is that I only started thinking about college right around junior year, and so I kind of, I was like making my list. I was like trying to look at colleges. I was things like that. So kind of leaving everything all at once. But um, yeah, so those kinds of preparations I think are good to start somewhat early. But actually, like writing your personal statement, actually, narrowing down your college application list. I think that can be done, junior year. Even a lot of people continue working on their personal essay like in senior year up until application like days. So yeah, it's normal and fine to be updating it, changing it, and editing it. Um, but yeah, the actual application process you are only able to start in senior year. Applications for the next upcoming school year only open up in October of people's senior year. So um, I know some people will want to start their applications, years before, but yeah, you physically cannot start your application until October of your freshman year. I mean, freshman year, October of your senior year, at least on the Common App. So yeah, preparing everything beforehand helpful, but for better or for worse, you can actually only do it the fall of your senior year. So um, a lot of things are going to be sort of last minute, and that's normal.
Right. That's very helpful. I think that's very good that so conceptually or mentally and doing research that can start pretty
Mhm.
early, so that can help you to narrow down, for example, your list and things like that. But then start to prepare some documentation would be uh, uh, junior or later to start preparation, and the actual
Yeah,
physical application won't actually even let you input anything uh, by October that senior year, right? So,
yeah,
uh, but of course, students can prepare some documents in ahead. But I think these different stages of preparation for the application is very helpful. Thank you very
mhm.
much. And is there any things that you think that is important but maybe ignored easy during the application
um,
or even your preparation if we're talking about in a longer time?
yeah. I feel like anything I say will have already been said before, just
Oh,
because
okay.
people do this all the time, and so there is sort of the general advice that people give. Um, I mean, yeah, I suppose I can think of one. I would say that people can sort of accept and normalize that a lot of students are not going to know where they're going to go until the very last minute. Because I think a lot of people you see will sort of be people who have always known where they want to go. You know, they'll work really hard to get there, and you know they get in. And a lot of the times, you can see people who sort of have their entire path like straight on and are really like set on their goals. And that's really good. And there are people like that, but for the majority of people, I would say it's not like that. And so, if you don't really know where you want to go, or if you don't really know what you want to do, or if you don't get into your dream school and things like that, it's all normal, and it happens to pretty much everyone. And yeah, I'd say that when choosing at the end, I'd say it's really important to sort of discuss and talk to people around you about what you want to do. Um, don't try to figure it out yourself. I remember that I talked with one of my friend's parents for about 2 hours about my college choices because they had both gone to McGill, and so I was asking them a lot about that school because it was one of my last schools I was considering. Um, but I asked my friend's parents, I was asking like family members, I was asking friends, because it's definitely good to um, reflect and discuss things with people around you because they are going to be the people that know you. And so they'll have some good insight that maybe you haven't thought about in terms of like what kind of like environment would be good for you and things like that. Because it was mostly my friends and family who pointed out that they said, I really don't think you'd like being in like a rural, small liberal arts college. It doesn't seem like something that you would do. And I thought, you know what, they're right.
Yeah.
um, so sometimes you need to take a step back and have other people sort of do the thinking for you. And yeah, I would say that that's normal and important. And yeah, it's okay to sort of take it slow at the end when you're not really sure where to go.
Right. The next question is, are you happy with your list? Would you add more or reduce some? Or reduce some based on what you know now?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would say, if I could go back and sort of give myself advice, I would say don't apply to so many random colleges just because you got deferred from Harvard. It's not that serious. Yeah, I just sort of like I thought, oh my God, okay, well, I got deferred. I'm probably not getting in. I need to think of like all these other colleges to apply to. That was unnecessary. Like if you have a list that you're confident about, stick to it. It's okay. If you're applying to like I don't know, 9 colleges, but one of your friends is applying to like, 13, 15. You don't have to do that. um, yeah, so I wish I had applied to more city schools. I
Mhm.
didn't really apply to many city schools or many schools outside of New England. Mainly because I did know that I would want to stay closer to home and just sort of in the New England area. But there are plenty of schools in the city in New England that I could have applied to. And also, I
Mhm.
think it would have been, I think it would have been fine for me to apply to some schools outside of like this general area. Um, I kind of wish I applied to University of Washington in Seattle, Washington. They have a great campus, and they have their psychology program is pretty strong. But or places in Washington D.C. I think D.C. would have been a great place to go to live as well. Um, so yeah, I should have considered that a bit more. Um, I also wish that I applied to schools that were closer to me because the only schools I applied to that were really close to me was Harvard because it's right next to my high school. But I didn't apply to any school in Boston just because of I don't know a variety of reasons. I thought, yeah, I don't know if I want to be that close. I don't know if this that. But ultimately, I did realize that I like the city, and if I had been going to college, it would be a completely different environment. It would not feel the same. So I do regret that a bit, but I think that otherwise my list was pretty good, pretty comprehensive. I did apply to sort of like a number of unnecessary schools to apply to, like just sort of like out of stress. But sort of like my original set, I think was pretty good because I had maybe like three safety schools, maybe like 2, 3 target schools, and then 2 breach schools. So that gave me a pretty good that gave me like a pretty good lineup. And yeah, at the end, I sort of ended up only really considering 3 of them, but they were all 3 that from the beginning I thought I would probably consider. Um, so I'd say all in all, pretty good list. Could have done with some extra schools, could have done with some less schools, but yeah, I still think it was good enough.
So the next is, could you talk about some financial aid or scholarship assistantship options,
For sure.
either during or after your application?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I would say that this really depends on the student that's applying, though, because it really depends on, are you an American citizen? Are you an in-state resident for like state schools at least? Um, and or are you an international student? Just because financial aid and scholarships will vary greatly for different, all of those different categories. For me, since I am a U.S. citizen and I'm a Massachusetts resident, um, I was able to apply for FAFSA, the I don't know what it stands for, but it's federal financial aid. And so American high school students will all do FAFSA, which is the federal financial aid, and then most will do CSS through the College Board, which is it's financial aid through the colleges. So FAFSA provides financial aid for all colleges, and public colleges will only accept FAFSA for financial aid, whereas CSS is from the College Board, and it is to provide information to the colleges themselves so that the colleges can give their private or like their specific financial aid or scholarships, or no, financial aid. And so I did apply to a number of private schools, and then I applied to some public schools. So the public schools I didn't have to input anything for the CSS. They just did all of their financial aid calculations through FAFSA because FAFSA is the government, through the government, and public schools are funded by the government. So they're connected like that, and you don't have to do CSS for that. But for private schools, you have to do FAFSA and CSS to get financial aid. So I did all that. All of that also only opens up in the fall of one senior year. So um, they really only give you a couple months to do all of this. But if as long as you have tax documents and financial personal documents, things like that, if you have all those already on hand, then it won't take too long. But I went through both of those to get financial aid, and I'd applied to some scholarships through my high school. There was in January or February or so, there were scholarships posted, and you'd create a general application, you write essays, you write things like that, and then so that was all through my high school. I didn't have to go through other routes. But a lot of really motivated students will spend time and like go out of their way to find external scholarships through other websites or other organizations, or communities and things like that. And so you can definitely, if you look for them, you can find a ton of scholarships everywhere. And that's if you have the time and energy to do that, definitely really good. But it does take a lot of searching and more writing after you've already been writing a lot, so it can be a little tiring. But yeah, so for the colleges I got into, a lot of them provided some of them provided good financial aid, and some didn't. That happens a lot. um, so for example, if you're a U.S. citizen and you're a in-state resident, um, most likely the state, like your state school, will be more or less the cheapest. Some private schools, some private colleges might give a lot of aid or a lot of scholarship, and so some of those might end up being cheaper than your state school. Um, but yeah, so that's the benefit of being that's the benefit of sort of being like an in-state resident. For international students, a lot of international students don't get as much aid. Um, I know that I know that international students can't do FAFSA because it is federal financial aid for U.S. citizens. So they don't get they don't you're not able to do that. Um, colleges colleges may still give financial aid through CSS, so through like private through the school privately. But most of the time, most of the international students that I know mostly got their sort of um, financial aid through scholarships. So schools will offer scholarships, and so everyone is eligible for a scholarship. So a lot of the international students that I know mostly have like reduced tuition through scholarships and sometimes loans or something like that. But yeah, so financial aid really depends on the person and your situation and like your background and things like that. So that's something that most people like in terms of financial aid, no one is going to be able to tell you like what it's going to be except for the school itself. So that's sort of unpredictable, but it does end up being a really important factor when choosing colleges. I know a lot of people who,
Right.
I mean, honestly, most people I know had a college or multiple colleges that they were considering, but they didn't give good financial aid, or it just wasn't a very like, sustainable price, or um, some people get into a dream school, but then they're not given any aid and things like that. So it really depends. In my case, my last three schools I was considering was McGill in Canada, Brandeis in Massachusetts, and UMass Amherst in Massachusetts. Um, and I mean, one of the biggest factors for my choice was that McGill and Brandeis were both pretty expensive, and I just felt like I was getting a better deal in terms of like price and like quality of education and sort of convenience, like of being close to home and like um, general lifestyle. I felt like I was getting a better deal from UMass just because um, admittedly, like McGill and Brandeis are more prestigious names, and that's true. But they were going to be about three times the price of UMass,
Mm,
and if I sort of like let go of this like academic like this elitist ego, like I did know that the quality of education was going to be more or less the same. I mean, the name will be different, but sort of what I'll get out of it is basically what I'll be putting into it. It really depends on like what I do.
mm.
And the facilities at UMass were pretty nice. Like the buildings, the dorms, the food, all of that are all pretty good. So I felt like I was getting a better trade-off. So I did end up choosing that one in part because of the price, not completely, but it was a when I say a good deal, I mean like it was cheaper and the education was still good, so pretty good deal.
Good
So
value.
a lot of
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So a lot of people I know sort of end up doing thinking something like that. But yeah, with financial aid, it really is it depends. Like truly, no one knows until you get your financial aid back from the school itself. Yeah.
So, are there any options after you enter into the universities?
For financial aid and scholarships.
Yes, like can you get,
Yeah,
if you
definitely,
didn't
definitely.
get enough, can you get some extra help after
Mm,
you enter into that particular university?
yeah. Well, that question is a little complicated. I'd say, let's say you apply for financial aid one year, or let's say you're applying for financial aid the year you're applying, and they don't give you that much money. I would say, I mean, obviously, contact the school directly because I won't know. But
Right.
I would say that generally, if a school doesn't give you much financial aid the first year around, they're not likely to give you any more the next years. Honestly, what happens more is that the college prices actually go up every year,
Oh,
a little bit. So yeah, I would say every year, or most colleges every year go up a couple hundred every year or every couple years.
Mm,
You'll like people students notice the prices going up a bit. So I would say that if a school didn't give you good financial aid the first time around, it's somewhat unlikely that it would be any better in the future. I do know some people who got a financial aid offer when applying and they appealed it. So that is a possibility. I don't think a lot of students know that you can appeal financial aid, but you can contact them and say, you know, this is the financial aid you gave me. Like, however, we have these expenses that, you might not be considering, like, siblings or, health expenses or medical, like things like that. Or you can just say, this is just genuinely like not possible. Like, look at our income and look at what you're charging us. Like this, proportionally, this doesn't make any sense. So you can contact them and appeal financial aid. And I do know someone. I had a friend who got into Berkeley College of Music, and they gave her some aid, but it wasn't that much. And she contacted them and said, appealed and said, can you give me anything more? And they did end up giving her $10,000 more, um, which is a really good amount.
right.
So I do know that some schools you can do that, but also some schools it can be pretty difficult. Like I knew someone else who got into Northeastern, and that was like his top school. But then they didn't give him any financial aid, and
Mm,
so he contacted them and sort of asked, like, what is up with that? Like, is what went wrong? And they just told him that like he didn't qualify for their financial aid,
oh,
um, for whatever reasons, not because he was like super rich, but just for like I don't know, complicated, like
mm,
I don't even know. But so sometimes you'll have luck and sometimes you won't.
mm,
But yeah, I would say that if finances is the only thing that's sort of holding you back from a school, definitely contact them. You know, annoy them about it. But yeah, I would say that yeah, if they don't give you good financial aid the first time around, it's probably not going to be any better the next year. But I would say that scholarships are something that you can continue doing throughout college, throughout going to school, um, because most schools will offer scholarships on their own, like automatically. Like for example, I have a scholarship at my university that I received as an incoming freshman, and I can renew it as long as my grades are up to their standards, I guess. So a lot of people will get these sort of like renewing scholarships, and you can also apply to new ones. Like we have a scholarship portal that opened up in the winter, and so people can apply to that, and you can get various scholarships here and there. So that continues, and then yeah, otherwise, what happens with financial aid is that you just have to renew it every year. So you have to like submit last year's tax documents, or you have to sort of update personal information or whatnot. But that's generally pretty easy because you're only doing it for one school. You just like renew, you just update the information and submit it. So it usually doesn't take that long. But yeah, you have to, for example, with FAFSA for U.S. citizens, you have to do that every year,
mm.
and sometimes people complain about that, but it's not so bad.
Thank you very much. And
Mhm.
the next question is, can you comment on transfer options? I have an impression that it seems that students have options. Is that first 2 years they will be able to
Yeah.
apply for a transfer if they want to?
Hmm.
Uh, do you have you thought about that about transferring, or have you have some I guess stories heard from your friends or peers?
Hmm. Yeah, I know people who have or I know of people who have transferred, and I have considered it before, just because I do like my school for what it is, but I do regret not applying to schools in the city. So I did
Mm,
sort of submit some of those, but it was more of a backup plan, just because I am enjoying my time in college, and at the moment I don't think it's really necessary. But I did know that um, if I didn't sort of try and like have a backup like that, I would think I would sort of wonder like, oh, maybe if I had done that, maybe I would have like moved or something like that. But yeah, I know people who have transferred to UMass. I know people who have transferred out of UMass for different reasons. But yeah, transferring is an option for pretty much all college students. Not many people talk about it, I think, just because again, there's this like image of like, you go to college, you love it, you're there for 4 years, and like it becomes, part of your life. And it's true, but some people don't necessarily really end up being happy or being comfortable or feeling like they can succeed at whatever college they end up in. And a lot of people transfer, and a lot of people have a great time after that. And so um, yeah, totally. Someone That's another thing. Yeah, if you choose a college and you commit to it, and then you realize you don't like it, it's not going to be the end of the world. Either you'll end up liking it, or you can transfer. So it'll be okay. But yeah, I know someone who transferred into UMass because they previously were going to a like a smaller all women's college in Pennsylvania, and for a variety of reasons, like social, locational, maybe academic, like for all these reasons, it just wasn't really the right place for her, and she just really wasn't happy. So at the end of not senior, at the end of sophomore year, or in sophomore year, she decided to apply to transfer, and UMass, and she chose UMass because as a Massachusetts resident, again, it is a pretty good deal. And she already had a lot of friends and like people close to her who were going to one of the five consortium schools in the Amherst area, like Smith, Holyoke, Hampshire College, Amherst College. So since one of the problems with the Pennsylvania school was that it was sort of socially isolating, and it just wasn't really working out for her. The fact that um, she knew a lot of people at our school was helpful, and she felt like she would have more academic sort of freedom to take various classes. So that was one person's reason. I also know someone else who transferred out of UMass because he didn't like how big it was. He wanted to go to a smaller college in sort of a more quiet location. So he was also a sophomore. He was a sophomore who transferred from the fall to the winter. So we had a class together in the fall of his sophomore year, and then by this semester, by the spring semester, he had transferred to um, sort of one of those like small liberal arts colleges in New Hampshire, I believe. So both of them. It was kind of funny because with these examples, they're kind of doing opposite things. One person wanted to go to like a bigger school with more people that they knew and like more opportunities that fit for her, whereas this other guy wanted to go to a smaller college that had more opportunities that fit for him. So there's not going to be a right or wrong. It just really depends on the people. But yeah, I think that transferring is sort of seen as, I don't know, maybe like a taboo or a controversial thing to do. But I had like teachers who talked about, or I had a professor who talked about her transfer. Sorry, I'm trying to plug in my computer. So turn it. Okay, there we go. I had a professor who was talking about her transfer experience, and so plenty of people do it. But yeah.
Right. Um, is that more or less similar process as the application? Like there's some kind of a common app type
Um,
of thing, you just fill it out, or you need to do like one by one to each of the school that you would like to transfer to? I assume for in terms of transferring, you probably have pretty narrowed down list, right? So it's not that okay, you need to apply
yeah, yeah.
to a lot of
That's
universities
yeah.
at that time.
Usually people only apply to maybe two.
Right,
um, I mean, unless it's sort of a anywhere but here situation, then maybe some people apply to a lot. But
right.
I'd say most people just maybe a couple. Yeah, you can use the Common App again, but it's a different application profile.
Mm,
So there's most of the time you don't have a personal essay, you don't have like clubs. Like there's a lot of extra information on the first year Common App application that isn't on the transfer Common App application. It kind of is easier. You just kind of do your financial aid, and then you write the school specific essay. So like the supplementals, like they ask
mm,
why our school, or what's bringing you to transfer, things like that. And then there's some like personal information, basic personal information, but it's a lot less than first year applications. Yeah.
great. Okay. So the next question I think is kind of interesting is that
Hmm.
what you consider the parents' role
Hmm.
they play during your application.
Yeah. Um, hmm, I think it depends on the family.
Right.
I think it depends on the family. Some people are a very like collegiate family where,
Yeah.
everyone, all like, the parents have gone to college, the siblings have gone to college, the kids like already know, like the students already know where they're going to go to college, things like that. So a family like that, I would say, is going to have a very different dynamic compared to, like a first generation college applicant, or I don't know, something like that. But I think ultimately what all parents want to do is that they want their children to be happy and to, find somewhere fitting, um, succeed, and things like that. And it's just that, there are different ways of expressing that. So I think a lot of parents have a lot of stress about where their kids are going to end up, and that's, normal. But I do think that ultimately children have to make their own decisions. So families should be there to help and sort of, provide. I think one of the most helpful things that family can do is to provide information for the student, that like information that the student can use to sort of think about what they want, um, and just sort of be this like, I don't know, someone that they can like discuss their ideas with without really feeling like they're going to be pushed one way or another. Because I definitely found that the most helpful interactions that I had were just having like any kind of conversation where, I sort of discuss like, these things that I'm thinking about in terms of my colleges, and, saying like, what do you think, like, what do you think like I would enjoy, like what did you enjoy, or things like that. And so a lot of the time I collected a lot of information from the people around me, and then I use that information to make my own decision. um, I think another thing is that, um, well, yeah, again, it really depends on like the family dynamic. I think parents who, um, have a lot of experiences with college will sort of have stronger opinions on like what college a student should go to, or, what program they should do, and things like that. But at the same time, I think families, like for example, like a first generation student, I think the family will also have strong opinions about, oh, try to go to the most prestigious school or something like that, because, um, it is like it's this like opportunity. So it'll really depend on the family, and, I'm sure that some parents think that the best thing to do is to let the children sort of figure it out on their own, whereas I think other parents will think that the best thing to do is sort of guide them
Right.
in the right direction. So I'm not gonna tell anyone how to do it. But I would say that, personally, I found the most helpful thing was just, being allowed to make my own decisions, sort of make my own judgments, but getting information from other people and getting sort of feedback, and, just having like conversations about what those adults who, for example, went to this college that I'm considering, like what those people, liked and disliked, or, asking like friends and family, like, about myself, like what kind of thing I might enjoy. So I think ultimately, support is a parent's role. Um, but yeah, I think the best thing to do is to ask the student, your child, what they want, because it'll also depend on what that student wants. I mean, some people will want really strong direction, like, like just tell me what to do. Whereas some people, might say like, don't tell me what to do. I want to figure it out myself. So, like everything else in life, I guess open communication is the best part. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That's very useful
yeah,
for all
sure.
of us. So, thank you again for your time to share those very special experience for us. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
Final thoughts. I suppose so. Yeah. Yeah. I think that applying to colleges and then selecting colleges can be a really stressful experience, because it kind of feels, in the moment, it sort of feels like a end all be all. Like, like if I don't make the right choice, like it is going to affect my life forever. And I definitely felt that. So I would say that, obviously it's really important to choose a school that you're going to end up liking. And, you want to make the right choice for you. But, also, um, it's not like the rest of your life. You can choose a college, choose a major, and then, a year in, you realize you don't really like that, or you want to change it a little bit. You can change your major. You can, or you can like change what trajectory of like education you want, or as we discussed, you can transfer. And a lot of people will talk about how what they studied in undergrad didn't really end up being the exact same thing as what they're doing currently as an adult. um, and also in terms of like prestige, when applying to colleges, it's really easy to sort of think like, oh, I'd love to get into these Ivies, or like I want to get into this like um, prestigious school. um, and sort of think of it as like that's the marker of success. Um, and yeah, if you get into an Ivy League, if you get into a really prestigious college, that's great. If you want to go, go. But it's also, it's not going to be a huge deal if you don't get into like your top school, or you know, feeling like you're not enough because you didn't get into this Ivy League, even though you had like straight A's and a great extracurricular list and things like that. Because I do hear from adults that at the end of the day, the person who went to Harvard and the person who went to like a state school oftentimes end up working together. So you benefit from what um, you put in from your school, and that's I think that's really the most important part, is that um, if you go in with a mindset of like, oh, this, I'm going to a school, but it's not XYZ like prestigious school, like I need to make connections. You can make connections everywhere, and point is like nothing is like an end all be all. Nothing is like, if I don't get this, I'm not gonna do well. Like you can really do well anywhere, and it's really about like what you do as a student in your own personal life. Yeah.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Uni, for your great help today, and hopefully that I will have a chance to maybe interview again about your first year college experience. That will
Yeah.
be an interesting topics as well. And for our audience here, and if you are interested in knowing more about Uni's college experience, please comment below or send us an inquiry. We may ask Uni to help again, or ask other similar students to share their college experience. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.